So, and then the reason they stopped in the end of May, it was because then people were going on vacation. So they
Okay.
started that the shows they'd take the summer. There was still wrestling going on, but it was in just on the coastal areas because
In the
people
towns where people are vacationing.
where they're vacationing.
Right.
Yeah. Um,
On holiday.
on holiday. Yeah. So, but except for the summer months, I was going to wrestling every 2 weeks and I was seeing characters and whatever. Well, I'd seen them wrestle loads of times, but nothing clicked with me until characters clicked with me and certain wrestlers. But then in 1978, I saw Rocko wrestle Marty Jones, which I've talked about before, and my 10-year-old brain just exploded, and it was like nothing I'd seen. And
First time you saw, that's it.
no, I'd seen him wrestle before, but I hadn't. It hadn't had the effect on me that it did at 10.
Ah,
Because I was as we if we we're long there's probably a lot of long time wrestling fans listening here. When you're younger, it's characters and things that attract you or different. But then
100%, yeah.
10 years old, I'm sat with my granddad and I see this match that they had that if you haven't seen it, go and watch it on YouTube now. It's from 1978 and um, it's Rollerball Rocko versus Marty Jones, and Marty is wearing red tights and he's got a perm for some reason. Watch that match if you don't know anything about British wrestling and understand that there was nothing like it ever until they were doing it, but this was the first time that it really sunk in, or you can actually see it. There's some matches I've found of them two from 1976 where this style is evolving. This what became the junior heavyweight cruiserweight style, but this is the one that you can watch where you're going, okay,
And and
this is where it all changed.
and as a
This
kid, it appealed to you like a sport, right? Like, it wasn't
what
characters, it appealed to you like it was a who's gonna win, who's gonna lose, who's better, who's
it all did. Wrestling did always did that because I wasn't I like wrestling,
right.
but this actual match, these two were going at it so hard and so just that the wrestling was whatever it was, my
It got
brain
you.
tuned into that.
Yeah.
Because before that, I loved it. I watched all kinds of wrestling and I enjoyed it a lot, especially character villains and different stuff, different people. But I was more into character villains
Mhm.
and it's not the cool thing to say, but at 7 years old, Big Daddy was my hero,
Right.
who was, and because he was a
It
superhero
was bigger than life.
to us, bigger than life.
Right.
By 10, he wasn't. He wasn't my. These two were. So
Right.
they had their thing going on, and all of a sudden, Tiger Mask, before he was Tiger Mask, came over. Dynamite was 16 at the time when they started doing their thing. He had his incredible traditional British style, but he had like Dynamite. Even at 16, if you watch Dynamite Kid, he was just sensational. But then you've got two fellas that are in the mid-20s doing this incredible stuff. So he's trying to keep up with them. And then he goes to Calgary and takes his British style and the stuff that he's watched them do, and it all spread from there. Sammy Lee, who was Tiger Mask, came over, and in 79, and he had to keep up with those two as well. He'd brought his Japanese and he'd just come from Mexico. So that's the origins of that, because then Sammy Lee went back to Japan as Tiger Mask. He brought over Mark Rocco as Black Tiger. Dynamite was mostly in Calgary, brought him over because he by then he was what 20 or whatever, and not the 16-year-old that I remember seeing when I first saw him, because I saw him live when I was a child. He was incredibly skillful, but he wasn't the person when he was 20. He was a different person, he was just he had his started getting big, and he was just in a he'd found his style and just kept innovating things. So Mark Rocco stuck out the picture. Well, then the next thing, although he'd been wrestling, I'd never seen him on shows whenever he wasn't either at school or in the army, because there was a time when Finley was, when he was 16, was living in England once he left school and wrestling on opposition shows. He'd gone back to Ireland and gone in the army for 2 years. Now, I didn't know any of his history. I just know that Rocco sort of disappeared in 1980. What it was, he'd moved to work for Brian Dixon, and he was working in Japan a lot. And all of a sudden, Marty Jones's new rival is a young Fit Finley, who's 19 and is incredible. I'm going to mention a match here that's well worth everybody's time. At the same time, Davey Boy Smith was a young wrestler. He's older than me, but again, started as a teenager.
And I
was
think
young.